Hello, my name is Boyue and welcome to My Deep Guide. Today we're taking an in-depth look into the Likebook P10, so let's check it out. Alright, so here is the Likebook P10. So what is it? Well, it's primarily an e-reader. It's equipped with a 10-inch, not a 10.3, my mistake, but a 10-inch e-ink Carta HD screen. And it runs a resolution, again, slightly off than what we're used to at 1600 by 1200. Generally speaking, that 10-inch and not 10.3-inch does kind of reflect on its overall size, as it's a little bit kind of shorter and a little bit smaller than what we're used to. Design is very straightforward. From the front, we have just a flat front. On top of that glass, there's a screen protector that's pre-applied, comes factory pre-applied. At the bottom, we have one capacitive button, which works as a back button. The back is, as I said in the unboxing, it's quite interesting. It has this navy blue kind of color, and the material is like in the latest books devices. This is the magnesium polymer of some sort, so it's not just plastic, it's something in between. The thing that's most notable is actually these basically perforations, or the pattern that we have at the back, and they are actually not just a pretty thing, it's a very effective way to have it not slippery. So it's a very much non-slip device, which I really like. Other than that, you have absolutely nothing on the back. At the top we have the power button, nothing on either of the sides, and at the bottom we have a USB-C port with an LED for a status, is it charging or is it need charge or whatever, and a microphone port, and a little bit to the side there's a single mono speaker as well. Overall, it's a very clean affair, and I do like how it looks. I do like how it sits in the hand, and it seems that it's built very nicely. There's no give in it. It's not creaky, cracky. There's nothing really nothing feels cheap about it, and I think that's a very good thing, especially considering the price, because it is a cheaper device than the competition. But to be really honest, I don't see that cheapness anywhere as far as the design and the build quality goes. On the contrary, it actually has some things that, let's say, books, for example, doesn't, which is the pre-applied screen protector from the factory, because that process actually costs. So that's definitely an interesting thing to see. And additionally, even though, you're not supposed to fix your own device, and this is not for that, but servicing of the device could possibly be easier than the unibody devices and all of that kind of stuff, because it still has those two little screws, which should make it so that replacing a battery or anything like that is an easier affair than on the aluminum body devices. The size itself is really good. It feels good in the hand, and it's balanced okay, but now we come to the only thing that for me is a bit of a problem, and that is actually the weight of the device. So it is quite weighty, and when I was reading their specifications, they said that because it's using a Carta HD, e-ink Carta HD screen, which is a glass screen, which is fragile, they are using tempered glass panel on top of it to, protect it, of course, but that tempered glass panel adds thickness and adds weight to the overall the device. So yeah, it's not the thinnest, and it's definitely not the lightest. You can definitely feel the weight there, so that's something that you have to kind of keep in consideration, because it's at 458 grams alone, but as I measured, when you start adding the all of the other stuff, the flipbook cover and the pen and everything, you actually get to 700 and something grams, which is quite weighty. On its own, it's manageable, but definitely on a heavier side. Likebook P10 is, as I said, a 10-inch e-ink display device. It is powered by an Android 8.1, and inside it has a 4-core CPU running at 1.5 gigahertz. It has 2 gigabytes of RAM, and it has a whopping 64 gigabytes of non-expandable storage. So yeah, you can't expand it, but then again, you have 64 gigabytes, which is a ton. So for a reader device of any kind of capacity, I think that's more than enough, but there are options with which you can, potentially expand or backup, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later on in the USB OTG section. Other than that, it has Wi-Fi support for both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. It has a Bluetooth 5.0 for your speakers, for your wireless keyboards, mice, headphones, or whatever it may be that you want to hook it up. It just works, and it's really, really good. And that's pretty much it. And it does have USB OTG support, but as I mentioned, it's for storage. It's not exactly you shouldn't really count on it for anything else, so much so that even power pass-through doesn't really go through it. So yeah, the storage part for the USB OTG does work, but don't count on much else. But that's a good news, because then you can just simply back up the stuff that you have on one of these, and then kind of continue moving on and free up some space. Overall performance and the behavior of the tablet itself is okay. It's not blisteringly fast. It's not something that's going to blow your socks off or anything like that, but it does actually work okay. Opening up EPUBs and all those kinds of things, everything takes a little bit of time, and even refreshing is a little bit of a thingy. So it's definitely not in a hurry to get anywhere, but it does get there without pissing you off or without really ruining the experience itself. So yeah, I think it's perfectly fine as far as the performance goes. I didn't run out of RAM or anything like that, but when I do start doing the bigger tests, like loading up a really heavy document like the Hercules DJ thingy with a huge image, yeah, I don't think that I can wait that long, because last time I left it to do it for like 7 minutes or so, and nothing happened. So maybe eventually it would load it up, or maybe it really doesn't like that document, which is perfectly fine, because the document is just it's a bad document. That's why I use it for testing the performance. But as you can see, it's taking quite a bit of time. Probably it would open it at some point, but yeah, it's just not. Well, there we go. Actually, it did manage. So what, I needed to just go in back and then it would open it? Okay, let's see, how does it handle the rest of it? Well, okay, I take it back. So it is able to open it, and once it's loaded, it can keep it in RAM and it works fine. Okay, so that was a good thing. Obviously, there was something weird with loading up such a big page. I didn't try that before. I went straight to home, but when I did the back button, it actually displayed it. So that's a good thing to see. But yeah, generally speaking, the performance is fine. It's nothing that's gonna impress you, and it's not something that's gonna get in the way. I think it's perfectly adequate. The screen is a 10-inch e-ink Carta HD type of a panel, monochromatic of course, runs a resolution of 1600 by 1200, and that amounts to around 200 ppi. So it means a bit less of pixel per inch density than the regular 10.3-inch devices have, and actually even less than the 13.3-inch devices, because those are at 207 ppi. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. Generally speaking, the image is quite nice, but you do notice those 200 ppis pretty much from time to time, especially on documents that have a smaller type of a font and all that kind of stuff. So let's zoom in so that you can see. And yeah, this is the tip of the pen, just so you can see just how small these letters are. But even at this size, they are perfectly readable. However, they are a little bit fuzzy. So those 200 ppis, they do translate into something that you can notice. And of course, they had to do some, price cutting at some point. This kind of thing also shows in the images a little bit. So it's nothing drastic, It's just simply that is there. And when you do a back-to-back comparison with with a 300 ppi or a 227 ppi device, of course that there is a difference. Then again, when you open up a regular type of an EPUB, or for example document, something that can be formatted normally, so this is default formatting of the EPUB that I opened here, and it's a combined EPUB about drawing and all that kind of stuff, so it has a lot of images and a lot of text. You can see that the performance of the screen is quite nice, and more importantly, the larger text, of course, is nice and clearly visible. Is it razor sharp? No, of course not, because it's at 200 ppi. But I think that it offers a nice balance between, cost and performance ratio, because you have to keep in mind that Likebook P10 is one of the cheapest 10-inch e-readers out there. So definitely it has to kind of cut down the price somewhere. They cut down a little bit on the screen, but I think they managed to get a very good compromise, because whenever I read, or kind of while I was testing it and using it, I didn't really actively notice this as a draw of some sort or another. Now, if you're overly sensitive to this kind of thing, or if what you're reading are exclusively PDFs with tiny little fonts and then you have to use formatting and stuff, then this is something that you have to keep in mind. But for me, for the regular use that I was using, I would often forget that it actually has lower resolution. I had to actually remind myself that this is a different panel and not the standard 10.3-inch device with the resolution and all the stuff that we're used to. So I think it's perfectly adequate, and it just works well. The contrast is really, really good. The screen whiteness is pretty much standard like any other device. So just like the performance of the device with the CPU and everything else, I think it looks bright. The contrast is good. It's not the sharpest one because of the 200 ppi, but then again, in a daily use, I don't kind of notice it unless I am really looking for it. So for me, it's a very nice balance here as well. However, there are a couple of areas where P10 excels in when compared to the competition. So the first one would be the front light. So we do have a dual front light. So you have both of these available. The blue and the amber light is there. You can link them together so that they can perform as you would expect, right? And they can go fairly down and fairly much up. So fairly standard affair as far as that goes, right? However, where it does excel in compared to the other devices is because it has this simple little addition, which are the presets. So you have a day preset, a night preset, and a bed preset, and of course a customize. Differences are subtle, but they're definitely there, and it's something that's quite usable. And of course you have the option of turning the front light completely off. So I do prefer, again, that the device is focusing on usability things. So this is a very simple thing to add. Every dual front lit device should have this, but as far as I know, this is the first one that I've seen that actually has this. A simple but an excellent thing to actually have on your device. And the second thing is that the contrast is actually quite flexible, and it is in the usable range. Far too often I see an option where contrast has like a bar, and at the minimum it's completely useless, and off the half of the contrast scale is completely unusable because everything explodes or is totally black. Not here on the P10. The range is actually perfectly usable, and even if you go to the minimum, it still displays quite nicely both the text and the images themselves. So I think that the calibration of the contrast control itself is really, really well done. And as you can see, the overall image quality of the display is quite nice. It's very pleasant to read, and it's very pleasant to look at the drawings and all of these kind of things. I don't know what exactly makes it so, because on specs, yeah, there are things that you could say that you could fault it for, but the real world experience for me is that it's a very, very pleasant screen to spend extended periods of time with, and the combination of everything is balanced just right. It's a device that I can spend hours and hours and hours to read and mark up and check out the documents or things like that, and my eyes will not tire at all. My hands will because it's heavier, but my eyes won't. Oh, and one more thing, it's an important one to have, is that it does support Regal mode in Reader, which is, of course, most of them actually support the Reader, but we do have selectable A2 mode. And the performance in A2 mode is pretty standard. I think, again, okay compromise between ghosting and the performance. I think they kept more, they calibrated the A2 mode a little bit more in line of keeping the quality of the image and not that much ghosting when compared to Boox devices, for example, which are definitely faster, but they leave a lot more ghosting residue in there. So it's an interesting approach to see, and I think it's a usable A2 mode, not blisteringly fast, but again, perfectly usable. The only thing that's really weird about it is that the text on the icon actually says something really weird, which is when it's disabled, the button says A2 mode, right? Which is okay, fine, that makes sense. Like, press it to make to enable A2 mode. But once you press it and once A2 mode is enabled, yeah, you get the icon here, which helps definitely. But then the icon says enable A2 mode, but it's already enabled. So it's like, what is this madness? It's a tiny little thing, but yeah, it's something to kind of keep in mind. Just keep the indication here. If you have an A2 indication here, your A2 mode is on. If it's not there, then your A2 mode is off. Likebook P10 is equipped by a 4000 milliamp battery, which is certainly massive. I performed or attempted to perform my standard series of battery tests that I normally do on these types of devices, and they're twofold. One is continuous writing for half an hour or an hour, and then I extrapolate the percentage used and what the total expected use time would be. And the same thing is done for the reader side of things, where the device itself is kind of doing a slideshow thing, auto-flipping pages in different conditions without the front light, with front light at 50 and 100%. This is the very first time that I couldn't complete my writing portion of the test because the writing experience was so uncomfortable and so detached and so bad that after 15 minutes of writing, I did not want to write on it anymore. Like, I stopped completely. It was just that's it for me. It was too much. Now, my main problem that I do have is that lack of ability to calibrate the pen. So everything is offset and there's quite a bit of a distance and the pen is uncomfortable and all of these kinds of things. It just was, in that combination of things, it was a very unpleasant experience. That being said, I managed to do 15 minutes, so from that I could extrapolate how much battery time was used, and basically, yeah, that we could maybe, take this with a grain of salt, but with the front light at 50% and continuously writing, yeah, maybe you could get around 16-ish or 17-ish hours of writing time. As I said, this was not a complete test, so this result is neither here nor there, just an estimate. On the reading side of things, because the device was just doing its thing and it's a powerful reader, I was able to complete the test without a problem. And without a front light, you're looking at around total expectancy of 50 hours with a single battery charge. With the front light at 50%, it's around 33 hours. And when you crank up the front light all the way to 100%, total battery life expectancy is at around 20 hours. Throughout all of this, the battery standby time seemed to be completely normal, so it was able to be shut down for 2 days straight without dropping a single % of the battery life. So the standby time also seems to be a complete deep sleep state of an Android device, which is a really good thing to see. All in all, I think that the battery life is quite good for this device, especially if you consider using it as a reader, which is, it's primarily meant to be a reader. In that type of setting, I think you're going to be well set and it's going to provide plenty of battery life. Now, Likebook P10 is primarily an e-reader device, and if you buy it as a default option, it comes without the pen. The pen itself comes as an extra option, or an optional extra, if you will, that you can buy if you want to do note taking. And I think this is a very important thing to remember, that this is primarily an e-reader that can do some note-taking. But as soon as we open the door into note-taking, I have to test it equally as I would any other device. I just wanted to kind of give you the pretext of what the focus of the device is, so that the context of what's about to come is can be placed in a correct way. The pen is optional extra, and this portion here is all aluminum, this portion here is plastic, and then we have this nib that protrudes, which is of standard that we don't know of. Twist the end of the pen off and you'll expose that this is an active pen that's powered by a single quadruple-A battery. And now we're starting to get into the territory of what the hell is going on here, because first of all, it's an active pen that doesn't have an eraser and it doesn't have a button that actually does anything. It's just a pen, and it's powered by a quadruple-A battery, so it's not a rechargeable pen. The quadruple battery here is lying at the top of the pen, which you can definitely feel, because that's the biggest weight of the pen, is that battery, and it's something that's kind of always making the pen want to tilt and fall over. So it's back heavy, which is very, very uncomfortable to actually use on a prolonged in a longer period of time. So that's my first gripe. The second gripe is, of course, that it's a quadruple-A battery, because it means recycling and it means an extra expense for changing those batteries. I don't know how much they last, because yeah, I haven't had it for, what was it now, 2-3 weeks. So in 3 weeks and periodical use and testing, it's still working nice. But I don't have any indication here to know if it's on or off. There's no indication in the system to actually tell you if it's on or off or anything like that. So there's no buttons, there's no eraser, and to top it all off, the tip standard that was used here, nibs, is something completely custom. So you can't just buy a replacement in case you don't like this one. That's a problem, but the biggest problem for me is the design of the nib. And as you can see, it protrudes quite a bit more than a standard pen does, and it doesn't have a proper support here on the side, which means that when you're writing, usually at an angle, this nib is getting to receive a ton of pressure, all of the pressure that you have while you're writing, and it's high enough to allow for this to actually break. This is something that we've seen in the failed design of the Note Air original pen, because the nibs would break or the pen would break at this pressure point. So there's a very good reason why the manufacturers let the nib to be that much shorter. Yes, you have to change it more often. This one in theory would last longer because it's protruding for longer, but that pressure point, I haven't tested to a breaking point, but I can already see now as I rotate, you can see that the nib is starting to bend. And you can see that it's now pointing a little bit forward to this direction. So, and this is just over a period of maybe couple of days of proper use. I imagine that over an extended period of use, or if you have an exceptionally hard pressure, that these nibs will be prone to breaking. That's something I'm going to test when I'm done with this, to see how much pressure they can take and is it something that's reasonable or not, because it does seem like a design flaw. Pen feels itself okay, but then we have another problem, which again is an indication of yeah, that things are not the way they are supposed to be yet, and that is the lack of pen calibration. Now, the user manual says, yes, there is pen calibration, but at this latest version that I have of the OS, and what are we now, mid-March or towards the end of the March of 2021, that option is now gone. So I don't have an option to calibrate the pen, and that is a problem that you will see how it translates in the writing experience. For now, let's just leave it at that. So overall, the pen itself, not comfortable, not that functional, not that great, not the best. And I think it's one of the weakest parts of the whole package. General user interface is a very pleasant affair and it works properly. There are several things that I do like about it. The very first thing that you should kind of keep in mind is that when I got the device first, it wasn't in this mode. It was actually in a different mode, which was like a minimalistic mode or something like that. I think that it's under device settings or maybe user settings. User settings, yes. So the default way that this tablet was displaying when I first got it was like this. So this would be the home screen where you had your kind of shortcuts to modes like library, notepad, browser, gallery, music, user settings. And this I find very refreshing, and that you can actually just swipe and go through all of this. This is a really cool mode to be in because you don't have to go into apps and out of apps and all of these kinds of things. Now, this is going to make sense to you depending on what your use case scenario is, but I certainly think that it's a very refreshing thing to have at least the option, because if somebody is jumping from an app to an app constantly, then this mode makes a lot more sense. If you're not, then the library mode actually makes more sense for your use scenario, but you certainly do have the flexibility to make that choice for yourself. They are not making the choice for you, they're just presenting you with the options, and that's a really good thing to see. So in a standard display, if you choose the standard display, then we have recently added, and that actually works for mainly for the library itself. So what you can think of is that at the bottom here, we have the mode that we are in, and we have a notepad mode, we have a reader mode, and we have the apps mode, right? So this is where you choose your main tab, so to speak, and depending on which tab is open, these options here will change. So depending on if you're doing a notebook or a reading or applications, these things change. And on the very top, because it's an Android, of course you have your notifications bar, but again, they were quite smart and the important icons are exposed, but not in the way. So we have our home, we have our back, we have a full screen refresh, front light controls, notifications bar here. If you slide it down, then you get the notifications and all the other stuff that you need, and multitasking or background management icon is there as well. So a lot of the stuff is really handy, and generally speaking, I think that this is a very nicely balanced user interface of an Android 8.1 that I've seen. Tons of options are exposed and at your fingertips, but I don't feel overwhelmed at any given point, and it's very intuitive. That's a difficult thing to do. Usually Android devices do suffer, that expose a lot of functionality, they suffer from a steep learning curve and lack of intuitiveness. Not so on the Likebook platform, and that's something that's very nice to see. The notifications area is really simple. You just simply swipe down around here, and then you get your additional options such as Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, battery saver, which is really cool to have, screenshot, airplane mode, settings, volume control, contrast control, and then you also have notifications here. And if you have notifications, then they will be listing down there. Another thing that's really important to actually know is that Likebook P10 is by default, I believe that it's Google Play certified, because you do not have to register the device like you have to do with the books. So by default, when you go to apps, you will see the Google Play Store. If for some reason you don't have the Google Play Store enabled there, but by default you should, but if you don't, all you need to do is you go to settings, user settings, and then at the bottom you have this enable Google Frame. It should be Google Framework, but still enable Google Frame, and it should be on by default. That's basically you turning the Google Play Store on or off. And there's no registration, nothing needed. You just turn it on and that's it. Maybe in some cases you need a restart, but I didn't. For me, it all worked out of the box, so that's it. And then you're done. And then you just normally use your Google Play Store as you're used to. So that's a huge plus as well. Now, an interesting thing to see is that if you start digging into the options, first of all, the options are very nicely kind of laid out and you have these things that are kind of cool, but then you have this arrow here and then you get to more options, and all of this is kind of standard, and then you get to the bottom which says Android settings. And then you go to Android settings, and suddenly everything is exposed, like the whole options, all of the options that the standard Android does have are at your disposal. This is usually locked or hidden really deep in pretty much all of the platforms. Not here. They're exposed, and this is extremely powerful, can be extremely powerful, and should be used only if you know what you're doing, of course, and if you're an Android user. But that being said, it does have options that are not advertised, such as if you go to connected devices, we have casting. So we are able, well, now I don't have anything turned on, but I am able to do screencast from the Likebook P10 onto my TV or any other Miracast enabled device that it wants to cooperate nicely with. That's a really cool thing to see. And also you have the USB connection options. Do you want to do file sharing? Do you want to do just charging, or all of these kind of things? So it's a really interesting thing to see that the hidden options, or basically all of the flexibility and versatility of an Android platform, is still available, though it's a tiny little bit hidden. Not really hidden, it's just a little bit tucked away to the side, but it's definitely there for you to customize the tablet exactly toward your needs. So that's a really cool thing too. The only thing that was a little bit weird was that I couldn't actually find a do not disturb mode on or off. So the way that I got to the do not disturb option is to Android settings. Then I went to sound, and then I disabled the notification volume all the way down, and then the notifications were off. So that actually worked for me, and once I turned the notification volume all the way down, then it automatically went into the do not disturb mode, which is fine by me. So that's the only thing that was a little bit weird. Overall, I really do like what they did with the Android 8 environment and how it's been presented and how approachable and intuitive it is to use, especially when compared to the Books platform, which is not that intuitive. This one is far more approachable and easier to kind of pick up and learn on the fly. So a very good job there as well. As a reader, because that's its primary function, I think it performs excellently. So as I've shown before, you saw the screen and all that kind of stuff, so I'm not going to go over that that much. And I've shown the contrast control for the screen and all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to focus on the reader itself and a little bit on the library. Library is good. You are able to add folders. The thing that you need to keep in mind is when you're in library mode and you start adding folders, you are adding actual physical folders in the books folder of the device itself. As far as I know, I don't think we have like bookshelves on books, so these are actual folders that you are working with. We can display it in different ways, so it can be lists, it can be many different ways. You can sort by file, you can search the books by title, of course. Then you have batch management is across the board. They call batch management multi-select option. And you have to be in a folder that already has files, because the batch management doesn't really open folders. So you can only select files that are within the same folder, and then when you get into the batch select mode, then you do your typical thing. And once you're in a batch mode or contextual menu, when you select something, then you can have unreading, readed, readed. Okay, that's nice. I haven't seen that before. So readed, unreading, copy, cut, and delete. So this is basically unread, read, copy, cut, and delete. Some basic type of file management is there, and the contextual menu on an individual file will give you an option to rename it, edit, I believe, the name, delete it, and it gives you the basic information about the document itself. Now, we also have an option of recently added, but the thing that I really do like is that the notes here is actually a shortcut so that you can access your annotations and notes that you've done in the documents themselves. So that's a really cool thing, that you have directly from the library a way to jump into notes of a specific document, and that you don't have to go into a document and then into the notes. It's a small shortcut, but on a daily basis, if this is something that you're using a lot, this is something that can be a really, really good time saver. So I do like how that's been added, and it's a very nice thing to see. The library supports following document formats: text files, documents, docx files, PDFs, HTML, EPUB, PDM, CHM, FB2, MOBI, RTF, and DJVU formats are all supported by the Likebook P10. As you would expect from a device that's a dedicated reader, that's where it shines. It has extensive options, so I'm not going to go through all of them here. That's going to be in a separate video, which is going to be a guide. But we have our table of contents, which also shows the bookmarks if you have them, and you can edit and rearrange your bookmarks the way you would like. Then we have also in the options, we have the underlying notes, we have our text notes, where they have been written, and our marginal notes, which are basically our notebook pages that are associated with this document. So this is a little bit different than in other devices. So definitely you can do that. You can create like a notebook that's associated with this one, but I think they've taken it a step further, and for me personally this works really, really good. It needs some refinement, but it works so far really good, because what it does is you don't have an individual access to those notes or that notebook. Instead, they are here, and then you can just kind of access them in this way, and then you can share or export from the document itself. So I think that this makes a lot more sense than hunting everything down. This way, everything is kind of batched up and contained within the document, which is the way it should be, because it's associated to the document. So for me, it's a really, really good way to actually kind of collate everything into one place, and it worked great. We have progress, listen through, so basically it can speak, it can it can have that slideshow thing in, it has an overview of the document, all of the standard stuff that you would come to expect it. No, it doesn't have an inverted mode, though there is a cheat that you can do. I'll show that a little bit later. Then we have settings. I'll get to formatting, but in settings you have also the areas where the touch areas are going to be: next page, previous page, and the menu. Then we have the choosing between normal and regal mode, refreshing frequency, when do we get a full screen refresh, and then multi-document mode, zoom page control, reading health reminder, more settings as well, so you can go a little bit deeper as well. So plenty of controls here. However, of course, the formatting is the one that's the important one, and here it's really, really good. Even though this is called orientation, this is basically just the rendering of the images and the text. So you can go from lightest to darkest, and then you can use a custom control. And in custom control, you have separate control for the darkness or the contrast of text, images, thickness, brightness level, removing watermarks, all the stuff that you can actually think of. Then we have typesetting, which is very cool because we can have automatic one, which kind of fits where you want it to be, full page or width. You can have it as a scrollable, so that you can, but only if I'm in A2 mode, then it's gonna make sense. Right now it doesn't make sense to actually do that. I keep it usually on automatic or in kind of a fit mode like this. And this option here on the side is basically like the navigation on books. And what it does is super useful, because what you can do is you can define where the page split is going to be. So I can just kind of shape up this to be the way I want it to be compared to my document. So I can just kind of make this a little bit lower here and trim a little bit here, and then I can confirm. And once I confirm this, so let's keep this one in the middle. This one also should always be kept in the middle. That's a bug. What we're gonna have is that this is going to be my page, and then I'm going to press next, and then I'm going to see this, and then I can read the entire document like that. I think this is an extremely powerful thing to have. Of course, I didn't keep in consideration the formatting or the aspect ratio of the page. But this is a super powerful way because you can actually trim and turn useless documents or super small documents into something that's very usable. Now, it's not perfect. You can definitely encounter a bit of a bug here and there, especially with the images and how they are kind of oriented. So it's not absolutely perfect. Sometimes I would get a little bit of a stretched out image or things like that, and mostly I believe that the thing that it would benefit most from is the ability to keep the aspect ratio locked to the aspect ratio of the screen. That way I believe that you will be able to get the best results out of this kind of approach, because it would definitely be good to have an option of this kind of being in the proportion of the screen. So I can try and make the trimming so that I get roughly approximately more like a aspect ratio of each quadrant to resemble the aspect ratio of the screen. And let's see what do we get then. Okay, so now it's, and there's the bugginess that I was talking about. So sometimes it just simply kind of it does work. It's doing things in the way it should, but for example here with that page that didn't really translate, it kind of bugged out and is having an issue there. It's not such an often thing that I've encountered, but it does happen from time to time. So it's something that I think is needs some refinement, but the option is really good to actually have there, and once it's fixed up, to have it even better. I think it's going to be really cool. Now in the options here we also have the side to side option. So let's do this, and then you have to do rotation, and the rotation icons are really weird and super unintuitive. I can never know, they don't correspond. What you see on the screen doesn't really correspond to the orientation, so you just have to kind of guess, which is of course not ideal. But we do have this split screen mode, and it's possible to kind of arrange things depending on your document, of course. But then it kind of flips pages two at the same time, which is a very handy way of dealing with documents. And finally, we also have the option of reflowing, or they call it rearranging, and it actually works quite nice. So unlike most of the stuff or most of the other devices that I've used when they are doing the reflowing of PDF, this one is able to handle it, it seems, better than the usual ones. And yeah, so I am able to reflow my document in a way that it actually keeps the images and all of the text. Most of the text is actually kept the formatting as it should have. It of course is a little bit jumbled around here and there with the images. That's only to be expected, because reflowing will always kind of mess those things up a little bit. Additionally, it is of course possible to long press on a word, and then you can have custom dictionaries which you need to download, and then from StarDict, I believe, and then you just place them in the dict folder in the device, and then they will appear here, and then you can use those dictionaries. Or you can create a selection, which is not always the best, because the handle is right underneath where your finger is. So it's very finicky and quite tricky to actually get it to be right. So the good thing would be that the touch is actually on the handle and not on the cursor as it is currently, because it makes it a little bit difficult to see where you've put your handle. But once you do have a selection, you have an option to copy the text that's selected to make it an underline or a selection. Then you can turn a selection into an annotation where you can type in your added text. So let's say here, and I've installed Gboard here as well, and then it has voice to text. So, and this is my annotation that is dictated into the tablet via the Google Board keyboard. There. And it actually understood. First it says like, this is my invitation. Oh no, that doesn't make sense. This is my annotation, but that's Gboard because it's just really good. So once you're done, don't go just back, press on save so that it's actually saved. And that way you've added your annotation. Additional options that you have on the selections that you made, you can do a web search on it, you can do a dictionary search on it, and you can choose different types of formatting of the underlying that you're using, or you can delete it. Once you've made those selections, as I said, they are appear in the bottom line here, and they appear depending on what you've made as underline notes or text notes, depending on what you've done. But underline notes are the ones that are with the long press select and everything is arranged nicely. You're also able to do note-taking, and this is where things are going to get a little bit meh. So first of all, as soon as you touch the screen with the pen, you will get this little option here, and then we have this note-taking options, which are exactly the same as in a notebook. So we generally have a pressure-insensitive pen and a pressure-sensitive pen. We have 5 colors to choose from: black, white, RGB. They don't, of course, this is a monochromatic display, but once you export, they actually show. And then you can choose the line width, right? And then we also have an eraser and different forms of eraser options, such as, let's go here. Oh, here it's just one and the entire page. Okay. And then we have this touch icon, but more on that a little bit later. So note-taking is quite a usual affair, right? But some of you might be noticing an issue that we're getting to it. We'll get to the writing thing, but you are able to write, and you can write in different colors, and once it's exported, it will show. Some of the writing options are accessible also over the top bar here, where you can disable writing completely if you want. You can change the touch options. And that palm rejection is quite an important one to remember, mainly because the palm rejection can be quite bad. Now, this is not something that I'm able to easily reproduce, but trust me, it's there. It's something that definitely happens more often than I'm happy with. When you're writing, you're probably going to want to disable the touch options here. And when you have anti-miss touch mode is optimized for handwriting and turns off click to page and 2-finger zoom. Okay, cool. Oh yeah, I forgot to say that naturally you have pinch to zoom. I mean, and you can zoom in as much as you want. And once you're zoomed in, you navigate with 1-fingered press. So this is kind of cool. And then you can write stuff here or and do whatever it is that you want. And then you can just zoom out all the way back and it just goes where you want it to be. So the pinch to zoom works normally, but if you do disable it here, then of course it no longer works, right? So that's disabled. But what also doesn't work is the back button. So when you disable touch for reader or the notebook, be aware that you are disabling the entire touch surface, registration of touches, and the back button will not work. So if you want to disable the back button, you have to disable the whole touch panel. That's how it works. And then we also have this one other option. It has to do with associating and creating notebooks where you can actually write your notes in, and associating them with the document or book or whatever it is that you're working with. So how does that work? Well, once I've gone into this option here, I have an icon down here, and the same icon can be noticed up here. So it goes to the same place regardless of where you access it. It's just up to you how you're gonna access it. So once I go into here, it's gonna say rotate the page and open the side note to display books and notebooks in split screen. Okay, got it. But if you don't, what it's gonna do is it's gonna go into a notebook, and here I will write my notes for book. Okay, when I press close, I don't close the notebook, I return to the book. And if I now go into not the table of contents, but the other one to the side of it, marginal notes. This is page 2 of my notebook that is associated with this book. So this is something that I really, really love. Additionally, that whole rotation thing that it talked about, if you do rotate and let's say that maybe we use it like this. Yes, I managed. So if you are in horizontal or landscape mode and you enter the option and I go OK. So in landscape mode, you get them side by side. And in this case, I can continue to write. But then the problem that I'm about to talk about is even more kind of noticed. But at least I'm able to do everything side by side. My touch is now disabled, so that's why I can't really... Oh yeah, there we go. Now it works. So now it works properly and I can do these things. So I really love the option of having this. For me personally, I love the way that it works as a portrait mode because it's so much easier to just write the notes, you press X and you go back to the document. So for me, that one really, really makes a lot of sense. And once you are in that mode and you access it from the top, you can switch between this one and this one via this small icon here. So this is my notebook. I go to the notebook or back to the document. And if you no longer want it to be as an option, you just turn it off and then it's off. So a really complete solution and something that works great as functionality goes. The only problem is this damn pen and lack of calibration and lack of compatibility because the device doesn't have a vacuum layer on top. So regular pens do not work. You're stuck with it. Overall, I think it's an exceptional reader and it's a very, very complete solution. The only thing that's bugging me at the moment is the performance of the pen, but I'm very much convinced that it's mainly due to the absence of pen calibration. So as soon as I am able to get some feedback, I haven't heard back from them yet regarding that, even though I submitted a ticket and everything like 2 weeks ago, it doesn't matter. No feedback yet, but if I were able to calibrate the pen, I wouldn't have that much of a problem because currently the writing and everything is totally off, but that's the writing section. As far as the reader capabilities go, really, really versatile, complete solution and really, really cool to use. As a reader, excellent capabilities and performance. Now, when we get to the notepad mode, this is where some stuff become to be a bit more adventurous. The first thing is that the user manual says that when you're in the notebook mode and you go into note settings, you should be able to have, and it just kind of clearly says that you should be able to have the access to the pen calibration mode here, but you do not. In this version, I do not have it. That's a problem because this pen has never been calibrated. The device never asked for pen calibration and it performs as such, which means that it's totally off and the writing is not calibrated and really unpleasant. But that's basically where you get to your note settings. Now, the note management is a little weird because we don't have folders like you normally would to organize your files. If you do a long press, nothing really happens. You just open up the notepad no matter what you do. But instead, you have these 3 dots on the side and then you have an option. So right off the bat, we have a completely different user experience in the notepad from the rest of the stuff, from the reader, which for me is not the ideal thing. The reader and notepad experience, the contextual menus, the abilities, and the ability to make folders and all that kind of stuff should be identical. You should have the same options. However, we have an option to create a note. We can search notes. And you can do word key search here through your notebooks, but it takes an extraordinarily long amount of time. So let's try and find, yeah, this is a tiny little document. Okay, so if I go search, it's going to ask me by note data, which would be the words contained in the notebook or a notebook name. Note data, and I'm going to go writing, go search. And this one it found from before, so it remembered it, right? but at the bottom it's still doing note search. And this note search can take a very, very, very long time. The initial searches are always going to take quite a bit of time, and that's something that you're going to be prepared for. For me, it took just a little bit too long of a time. So how do you organize your notebooks if you don't have folders? Well, if you notice here, we have our hashtags here. So each notebook has a hashtag which defines its group, and by default, it's every new notebook will be in ungroup unless you set up options so that every new notebook is actually created in a specific group. The only problem here is, again, I'm not sure how can I select and display and basically filter if I just want to see mydeepguide notebooks and nothing else. So then you would say, well, okay, that's not a problem, you can just sort your notes. Well, yeah, I can sort my notes, right? But I don't have a group by group. So, you know, it's a concept and it's a work in progress. It's definitely not there yet. So it doesn't have all the options that it needs to be. There's just a hint of what's to come. And I think that the groups and the hashtags can be good, but it would be really nice to have just traditional folders, you know, just for us dinosaurs, to be able to kind of organize my content into something much more nicer like this, for example. Let's get the most obvious now out of the way. So the writing. Here's my writing example, and I'm gonna zoom in so that you can see what's happening. We have missed strokes, we have all this kind of stuff. But the biggest problem is this. I don't know if you can see, but can you notice just how far off that line is from where my pen tip is? It's really, really, really off. So this is something that affects the writing quite profoundly, for me at least. And the result is, yeah, I mean, yeah, this resembles words, but how the hell is a text recognition supposed to deal with this kind of a mess? So this kind of inability to calibrate my pen and the imprecision that I get from all of it is affecting the overall note-taking performance and the overall note-taking experience. When I'm able to disconnect from the offset that they have here, and basically, yeah, the main problem that I have, the writing feel is good, the pen is comfortable, and even though it's too heavy on the top and all that kind of stuff, the writing can be comfortable, but I can't really comment on it any more than that it maybe can be comfortable and maybe can be good because of this glaring issue, because it's just totally off. And the second thing is that if I go into a selection tool, then start to do selecting, look at this. There's some, yeah, there's just definitely either problems with the pen or the calibration is responsible for all of this, but I haven't lifted anything and it's just losing contact. Only if I keep it all the way on the side like this and then draw, then it works. If I keep it more straight, it just loses contact and then starts doing things. So if you do get your selections set to work, then you have your copy and delete options. So that's pretty much it. Oh, managed. Okay, cool. You can add a page, you can refresh a full page, you can disable palm rejection or touch, and that's an important one. And again, like in the notes, like in the library, it will disable the button as well. You have the same, exact same type of options for writing, same pens, same colors, same more eraser types though, in this case, which is good. No layers, no nothing. You have undo, redo, and that's pretty much it. You can insert a page with the plus sign as well. So fairly basic array of things. I mean, it's really good. You can customize your templates or the background, which is the paper switch. It has a decent amount of default templates, which are quite good and very much usable. But most importantly, you are able to use your custom papers custom templates if you set them up externally. There's no way to set them up here. You have to do that outside of the notebook in the system itself, and then it will work. And then you have this option of select group. You can change the group of the current notebook. You can do content search within the notebook itself. You can AI convert to text. So let's see how that works. You can just convert a single page. So let's try and convert a page which has more text on it, like this one. Let's see the performance. Oh, this one's done from before. So what we get, writing in inverted wide doesn't really work. Writing in normal mode is much better. Writing how I would, this is another pen, is a prune insensitive pen, but this is simply not a nice writing experience, mainly because of the nib and the writing away. Maybe it would be much ruptured with the pen caliber. It's that option. So what does that actually look like? Messy. So I'm actually quite impressed that it's even able to recognize anything from these scribbles. So my only guess, and this is just a guess at this point, is that if I was able to write in a more cleaner fashion, and if I was able to actually calibrate the pen, I would be able to write in a much cleaner fashion, and then the handwriting would be better, and then the text recognition would be better still. So there is definitely some promise here, but that pen calibration is a complete necessity to have, and that's the main blocking point that I have at the moment, and I hope that's something they fix very, very soon, because it's necessary to be able to use it as a note-taking device, because it has potential, it has functionalities, especially in context with the reader and the added, the notes pages on the side and all that kind of stuff. It would be absolutely fantastic. But at the moment of testing it, there's this problem. And of course, the additional problem of if you don't like the pen, you're stuck with it. So that's also not the best part of this whole note-taking story. Likebook P10 has excellent connectivity to the outside world because of the Bluetooth 5.0 and because it supports USB OTG as well, because wired keyboards also can be used. But yeah, the wireless keyboard affair is really simple once you've already paired it, and pairing is normal like any other Bluetooth device. And if your Bluetooth is enabled, they should be able to find each other. Yep, immediately connected, immediately knows that it's all there. And now, I don't know, let's go into here. I can type my annotation, details, notes, thoughts, and everything else. And the performance is really, really good. So for me, this works really nicely, and I love when a device is able to actually communicate to the outside world so that you can expand it in a certain way. Alright, so it's time to summarize the Likebook P10. And as usual, let's start with the cons. Well, the absolute biggest one for me is the lack of stylus calibration, and that the user manual doesn't correspond to what we have on the device. Not having the ability to calibrate your pen, in my case at least, led to the situation where the writing experience is so bad that I really don't want to use it. The writing is off, imprecise, completely disconnected, and just very, very unpleasant. Disconnected from that lack of pen calibration, the pen itself, I'm not a fan. Pen seems to be quite imprecise and somewhat inconsistent as well when you're writing. Because of that selection tool that I was showing, it can lose connection. It doesn't feel smooth, and it doesn't feel reliable at all. It's also an active pen that's a different standard to anything else. So The nibs don't fit. If you want to change them, you can't change them. It's using a quad A type of standard of a battery that has to be recycled, that has to be bought and changed, that's top loaded and heavy. It's not balanced well. It's uncomfortable to use. And even though it's an active pen, it doesn't have a button or an eraser. So it's a really weird combo. It looks nice. It feels nice, but it doesn't play nice at all. Additional problem for me as well is basically the weight. It's quite a hefty device, and I think that this is one of the rare occasions where the device basically crossed that threshold from comfortable use to, yeah, being just too heavy. As a writer, but then again, as a writer, the other problems are much bigger. So as a reader, it's not such a problem, but then again, it's on the heavier side of things. So you definitely have to keep that in mind. And now on to the pros. Well, it's meant to be primarily a reader, and as such, it's an excellent reader. It has excellent capabilities, versatility, and it just lends itself for reading really quite well. It's very customizable, and the approach to the Android platform just makes it highly usable. It has excellent battery life, very aggressive and competitive price. The screen protector, yes, I know this seems like a small thing, but the screen protector is pre-applied and it feels good and it performs quite well. And the build quality and the design for the price, despite the price actually, just in general, it just feels like a really solidly built device and very nicely designed device. In summary, the Likebook P10. It's not a perfect device, but it is an excellent e-reader. The note-taking part of the experience is mainly held back by the custom pen standard and the lack of ability to calibrate that pen. Even with the pen calibration, it just doesn't really offer that much of a good writing experience. It makes up for these shortcomings with excellent battery life, flexible front light system, and a very nice front light at that. Google Play certified out of the box, no need to register or anything like that, it just works. Exceptional customizability and flexibility, and advanced Android functionality, albeit somewhat hidden, like screencasting, for example. Overall, if writing experience and writing in general is not your primary thing that you're looking for, you don't mind a little bit of weight, and what you're mainly looking for is a powerful e-ink e-reader device that offers a very good Android experience for considerably less money than the competition, the Likebook P10 delivers exactly that. I hope you found the video useful. If you did, please like and subscribe and consider dinging the notification bell to get notified when new videos on My Deep Guide come out. Thank you so much for watching and thank you for the support. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video. Bye!